Previously on Work to Game. So he's going to spin again. Cyberpunk, we got some 2045 lore posts that I'm going to be working on. So hopefully you guys look forward to that. All right. Do we have a non-guild topic?
We do.
Yes.
It's called, it's only one away. It's called Burnout.
Ooh, okay. That's a really good topic.
When to take a break, when to return.
And it's like the wheel knows exactly what's on the hearts and minds of Final Fantasy players right now. When to take a break, when to return, the concept of burnout within Final Fantasy XIV. What's up, Workforce? Thanks for coming and checking out this video. We're going to have hopefully a really cool discussion about this because I'm often asked, hey, maybe the game's not doing everything that I want it to do right now. Or, hey, is it now the time to return to Final Fantasy XIV? And the answer always varies based off the person's relationship. Like right now there's a free trial that's coming back, so if you've been away from the game for any little bit of time, it's a good time to come and check out all the updates, right? That's a perfect time for it this holiday season as we build up to 5.4. Or if you're like, well, I've done everything there is to do, I've got all my relics from Bosha, I've gotten everything that I need to do, and I'm just kind of waiting around for 5.4. The good news is there's a lot of awesome games to play right now, and even more on the way. So really, depending on where you are, that's where this conversation's going to fall. I've got my opinions. Chris, how you doing, buddy? You look like you just rolled out of bed.
I'm tired. I've been burning the candle at both ends this week.
Yeah.
So I am personally pretty burned out. And it's not from a lack of joy. I think one of the big things with this topic is that people assume that burnout is something that is always the game's fault, or is that you're not enjoying the game right. You're not sitting back and enjoying it. But like, if your favorite movie, if you watch a whole series, or if you watch all of the Star Wars movies back to back, you can be burned out just because it's just too much content. So like with 535, Bosha's a lot. And it is really easy to overdo it. As we prepare for WoW Shadowlands, we know that new expansions, whether they turn out great or not in the long run, early on get a lot of hours. And so as you go into that, you want to set your pace accordingly. You don't need to see if you can play 90 hours a week right now, because then you're not going to have anything left for when there truly is a huge amount of new content.
Well, I think that's one thing you bring up, though. I'm gonna kind of preface this because I think hype can hide burn, and that's where, when it comes down to it, we've posted here on Work to Game in the past, kind of like expansion preparation guides. Like, note that it's so, like, even I just posted something over on Ginger Prime about Destiny Beyond Light prep. Like, guys, like if you don't feel like you have to hit everything, but you might want to just take a break and play something else if you've been playing hardcore like I have been over this whole summer, because that way you're going to be even more excited for when you want to put 90 hours, into the game, right? But right. If you and the hype thing is such an interesting concept because it can mask your the burn. And so what ends up happening, and I've seen this happen with a lot of gamers, personally, where hype will actually mask the feeling of just the fatigue, or you're just like, okay, what am I, but I'm excited. And then you go through the event and then you're really fatigued, actually, physically. When we get off of patch and expansion streams, there is just a physical exhaustion where it's I either need to go work out or I need to go to sleep. And this is one aspect of streaming, but it's also the same thing of when you play a game, when you get up at 4 a.m, and by the time 4 o'clock in the afternoon rolls around, you're physically, worn out, and, even though you're just playing a game that day. So there's also a physical side of it. But what I've seen happen is that people then get angry because all of a sudden it's kind of, they run into this wall and they're surprised by it. Like, oh, wait, I thought this was going to be the be all end all. But hype is kind of tricky. It can be like a drug for gamers. We can get overly excited and we can ignore either the reality of where we are, with the relationship with the game at that time, or we can ignore just its faults. And it's just I always kind of look at it like gaming as a relationship in a way. Whenever you're dating, somebody, and all of a sudden, they're perfect. Holy crap, this human is flawed, and it's we're flawed too. This isn't a work to game, dating, relationship advice, and video games. Welcome everybody. But have you ever had that kind of experience where it's you kind of tune off things that are like, hey, maybe maybe you don't need to put 1,800 hours into it this month.
Yeah, I think it can happen a lot with loot systems for me.
Okay.
Where like you get it in your head that like it'll be okay when like
Okay.
as soon as I finish my set, right? Like I'm pushing through Boja and it's like I'm gonna get my resistance gear set. As soon as I get my set, like I'll really like I'll feel like I've got this content under control. And
Okay.
then you get your set and like there have been times in the past where like when I get that last piece and you hit that and then what feeling, like all that fatigue catches up.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. And just all at once, you're like, I just feel like that drop rate was crap. And like I've done it. I'm over the hump. So I'm not just like complaining to complain, but like I just feel like that drop rate or that boss fight or that aspect of the community in whatever I just got through really wasn't as great as I was saying it was. And so I think where it can get you is for me, it especially gets me with repeated content.
Okay.
It gets me with content that feels like they're extending the amount of playtime that's meant to come out of it just to extend it.
Okay.
So like the World of Warcraft Titan forging system, it feels really good the first time you get a piece of quest loot that just rolls its way from green to epic. You're like, that's awesome. But then what happens is you get to where you're actually trying to chase best in slot, and like you see the piece drop that you want, but it doesn't forge. And everybody in your guild's got stuff that did forge. So effectively you've got your best in slot, but it's like a junk version. And it's like, oh, so I guess I'll just keep going until I find it again and hope that next time my roll gets a better roll within a roll. And so like it just fatigues me. So I know that's where I can get burned out with a game. In 14, thankfully, like typically highest eye level is your best slot. And so you just run your raid every week and it stays really easy. To kind of stay decently on top of it. Once I get my relic, like even if there's a better weapon, I probably just leave my relic equipped for the rest of the expansion. It's just easy to, it's good enough. Like there's never, unless you're doing ultimate, there's never a point where the relic, once you get the relic, there's never a point where somebody's like, what a noob, he's got his relic equipped. Like from here on out through the end of the expansion, I can just keep that thing on. It's fine.
So it's interesting is that, when we talk about just this subject alone and the idea of, like pushing forward, that's obviously what gamers who haven't taken a break yet from the game are faced with, right? And then the other side of that is that gamers who have played like 5.0, maybe 5.1, and they're asking themselves, is now the time to return? So let's flip the script on top, talking about what kind of can fatigue us personally, and let's talk about, like, is now the time to return to Final Fantasy XIV if you've been on a break for, I would say, at a minimum 3 months or more. So, is this a good time to return? If not, why not? And if so, why?
I think it depends on where you left.
Okay.
I think it depends on when you left, right? If you left in 5.2 because you like to do 20 hours of story in one go, I don't think there's 20 hours of story waiting, so hold off. If you left in 4.1 because Stormblood didn't engage with you, come on back, finish up Stormblood, get into Shadowbringers. It's a much better story. I feel like this is just us once again saying return because we've told that group of people to return before. And so we're just standing by that decision because Shadowbringers has continued to evolve into something that I think they'll enjoy. I would give that particular player a caveat to say, hey, when you go to do Boja, just realize it kind of ties more into Stormblood than it does into Shadowbringers. So just be aware that like you don't have to do Boja within Boja if you don't want to. And so like I think it really just depends on the conversation you're having with the individual player on why they left and why they're thinking about returning.
Okay, that's a great answer. For me, I would say, and like this is kind of how I look at it. We know how the patch structure works, and we know relatively when the expansion is going to be. So the question I would say is that if there's not a game, like right now as we go into the holiday season, we know 5.4 is going to be in December. They announced that with relative confidence. So that's kind of, they wouldn't have said December if they weren't like pretty sure, and things can change, but we're going to go ahead and assume 5.4 in December. So if you've been on a break for any period of time, like with the free, update, you can come and play for a little bit. Like that might be a good option to consider checking out. However, we do know that there's going to be a lot of really big games between the time this video gets posted and the time that December hits. And we're talking, heck, even if you're not interested in it, Cyberpunk 2077 looks to be a huge game. And one of the things I'm very thrilled about is I've been diving into the lore of the game itself, and I'm going to be sharing some stuff on that hopefully here in the next week. But beyond just Cyberpunk 2077, there's a ton of stuff happening. We have new console launches. And honestly, I would say from a PlayStation player, because we know that PlayStation 5 will run in backwards compatibility mode, just the PS4 version, Pro version of Final Fantasy XIV. If you're lucky enough to get a PS5 and that shows up, that might be a fun time to return. That might be something where it's like, hey, let's take advantage of those load times, and that could be a really good time. And then between then and the PS5 launch, you could sit back and you catch up on some other games, catch up on some shows, just kind of figure out what you want to play so that when that game and you do return, you can consume it probably to an unhealthy, degree in that regards. Because no matter what, like when you're excited and you're back, and especially if you've been away and there's over 20 hours of story for you to get caught up, there's going to be so much for you to do and to enjoy, and might as well hopefully have a really good experience with it. On the other side of that, with 5.4 and 5.5 and 5.5.5. Note that between 5.5 and 5.5.5.5, there is a long gap. Usually they do the 5.5 patch in two parts, with the story part 1, and then 5 having, so many fives. I can't wait till we get to the 6s, because we know there's not a 0.6, at least in the history of Final Fantasy. But having that and knowing that there's going
to do a 666.
Well, we've also never had a 0.6 patch as well. But like when we talk about just the roadmap alone, when you think about when we start hearing about 6.0 in February, when we start hearing about all that in February, there's like when we talk about that hype aspect, there's going to be a lot. And typically within the Final Fantasy XIV ecosystem, from patch 5.5 to 6.1 is going to be just a massive influx of people who are prepping and excited about the expansion, who are playing the expansion, and who are, going through that. So if you think about what we've got coming up in 2021 alone, it's going to be an incredible time to play the game. Plus, there's going to be a new Ultimate thing, so you're going to see Final Fantasy just jump up higher and higher in the Twitch streaming world. Lots of conversations. You'll even have friends like, hey, I hear that something's coming that's exciting for Final Fantasy. Should I jump in? And then we would point you to the free trial. So knowing that that's all coming up, knowing that that's kind of what the roadmap looks, if you've been on a break, you can either decide to jump back in with 5.4, or you can wait to jump back in with 5.5, and you're going to have 6 months of just hype, content, lots of little things to do, an easier leveling and gearing curve, because at 5.4, that's when all the kind of the gear is reaching its top cap within the game. But with 5.5, lessen the roll restrictions, the drop restrictions, easier time farming up the currencies, more of the relic stuff is finished, so you end up having less of an interruption in your game, right? So if you're looking at that, sometimes I would say it's either between 5.4 and 5.5 is the perfect time to return, especially if you've been on a break since the expansion itself. And that's actually what we see happen a lot in the community. A lot of people who are especially in it for the story, you get to play through pretty much the entire story, jump right into the expansion, and then you can decide like how you feel and if there's other things to play. And just the timing alone, that might actually work out well in everyone's favor this coming February. Chris?
Yeah, I think you named a number of things there. It can be debated as a separate thing on if the better word is sandbox or theme park. But ultimately, what Final Fantasy and games like it is really, really, really big chunks of content. And that content can vary wildly as you look across it. A lot of the things you just named are things that, if you put that in a list, there's probably very few players that clear the whole thing.
Okay.
Truly explore all the story, go off and truly explore all the things that come with a brand new expansion, the initial beast tribes, go off and do all the stuff that will come with 5.5 and the half patch. Go off and really finish out their relic, go off and clear the ultimate, go off and there is a lot in that window that you described that's going to be added to the game. What if we see Hildebrand come back? right? So we're going to see the end of Blue Mage between now and then, as far as like it's going to get its final level push between now and then 6-1.
Yeah.
When it'll probably go up by another, it'll probably finally hit level 80. Little late, buddy. And so there's a ton of content. And so I will say, to a new player, there's really very little risk. As long as they're making general progress on their MSQ to get over that ARR hump, because that's where we typically lose people, and they've shortened that hump, but it's still a hump. But as they get over that, as long as we keep them from getting lost in the woods, they can kind of just touch everything as they go. As long as we don't let them get so far off to one side that they go, I'm lonely, and then quit. And it's like, well, of course you're lonely. You never made it to the other side where we're all at. But for a person coming back, that's a little bit harder. So I would say, like, go look at the patch notes, go look at what previous patches have done. Mr. Happy at the beginning of this expansion put out a guide on like what all the patches were going to contain. Now I will say Shadowbringers has proven that after 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 becoming a pattern, they are allowed to break that pattern with 5.0. So they have surprised us in many ways. So that video is not a perfect it's not a perfect prediction of what has already happened, and probably will not finish as a perfect prediction. It was just a good guess, but it will give you kind of an idea of what typical things come in a 5.5 in case they decide to be typical, and what typical things come in a 6.0 and a 6.1, because it'll still apply. That way you can decide, like, okay, when I do come back, these are the things I really want to touch first. You know, that's the ride I want to run to in that theme park I've been to before. That way you don't just come back and then just flounder around and go, I don't remember why I'm here. I don't think I'm having fun.
That's a really good point. So, I mean, that's going to be kind of the question that we pass on to you guys. How do you manage your burnout? I know often when we talk about the Yoshi P says take breaks from the game as a core design philosophy, the old MMO player in me just goes, ugh, while at the same time, the dad in me kind of somewhat appreciates the fact that, I can go and play other games despite the YouTube algorithm like even caring about that fact, right? It's like, all right, like, no, Brian, you're a Final Fantasy player, and so that's where I'm like, oh, am I now? Multiple channel time. But all in all, like, I think it's important to kind of within yourself resonate, like understand how you're feeling, and then also in a way that this is like just more adult planning than it is just kind of consuming a game. Look at the schedule, look at what games are coming out there you're excited about, and especially with a game like Final Fantasy XIV or World of Warcraft or Guild Wars 2 or any of these games that do take up a lot of time and can kind of consume. Like just can be like, hey, here's 100 hours this month that you played this game if you had that ability. You want to have that flexibility so that you can sit here and not feel like you're missing out on great games, while at the same time not feeling like you're falling behind in some maybe in-game goals that you have within Final Fantasy or these other like massive games, right? So that's kind of where it comes down to it. Somebody was like, how do you play Final Fantasy and these other games? And it's like, honestly, like I just put it on my calendar. Like as adult and nerdy as that is, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna play a little bit here, and then I'm gonna do this thing until I hit a certain point, and then I'm gonna go and make sure that I also am aware of what's coming out, so that I can sit here and be ready and excited to play it, so I don't feel like I'm being pulled in 3 directions at the same time, because that's not fun. Like when you feel like you got to mow the yard, you got to do the dishes, and you got to re-roof your house, like that could be pretty stressful. Like you're like, oh God, and they all have to get done by tomorrow. You're like, okay, all right, you kind of lose the fun, and you can lose the joy when you're just trying to do too many things at once. So it's just kind of like, all right, what can I do? Let me go ahead and focus in on that and go and bounce around. So those are my final thoughts. Chris, you got any final thoughts before we wrap up this video?
No, I think it's time to spin the wheel.
Let's spin that wheel. I like how you got the wheel nice and lit up. It's all professional. We're getting there. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. If you are here and you haven't subscribed, let us know why.
Because it would be important that you're subscribed, because it's time for another community feedback.
Community feedback.
So community feedback, for anybody new, is where we go pick a video that has had a large community response, because this is meant to be somewhat conversational. And while we try to respond to comments, we can't always keep up, as you guys sometimes talk a lot on one subject. And so what we have a chance to do is go back and look at a lot of the top comments. A lot of comments will be kind of repeated things throughout something. So the way we're going to kind of pick who's to reply to as we try to catch the general trend of what you guys are saying is we will start with the people who have hit that join button as a thank you to you guys. And then we will move to some people that have hit that subscribe button. And then if there's something in there that you haven't hit subscribe, then we might grab 1 or 2 of those.
All right, guys. So tune in on Tuesday for our next episode of Community Feedback. We're going to go and curate your comments, and also be sure to leave your comments below here as well. So all comments right now are eligible for these topics. So we really appreciate you being here. Hopefully you guys are having a great week, and I hope to see you in our next video. But for Works a Game, my name is Brian.
My name's Chris.
Thank you for watching, and hope you have a great one. We'll see you next time.
Take care.
This video is sponsored by me, Ginger Prime. Hopefully you'll check out my podcast channel, Ginger Gaming Radio, which we have lots of guests, lots of great conversations, and even more highlights. Links are in the description below. Let me know what you think. Thanks.